Well, folks, you've heard the expression, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. This is not a studio background that you're looking into right now. Indeed, I am in a vehicle. This is, I think, the first time I've done the podcast from a vehicle. The vehicle is not moving, so I don't have to worry about getting pulled over. There's been a lot of movement, a lot of things happening over the last week. I've been involved in doing presentations from the U.S. and then into Ottawa, Calgary. I am now in the city of Edmonton in northern Alberta. And but I do want to keep my commitment to you on my Saturday commitment to give you a quick snapshot of things to look for in the week ahead. So pardon the fancy studios here and the fancy headgear. It's of interest to most people that Alberta continues to be pretty cold in the month of April. Looking right at what's going to be happening the week ahead, watch for the emerging story around the second U.S. fighter jet now has been downed, has been knocked down. This one's near the Strait of Hormuz, and the other one, this was an F-15E. Remember, one crew member was amazingly rescued after the plane was shot down. The other crew member, who is a technician advisory expert who flies on those F-15Es, is not found. There is some discussion that, in fact, he may not have ejected from the plane. This is of critical importance, of course, first and foremost for the lives of the crewmen. And secondly, once you get into hostage taking, if it's going to evolve to that, I don't know that it will. It doesn't seem like the second crew member has been captured, but things can radically alter when you get hostage taking involved, because in free and democratic societies, populations, the democratic notion and impulse, populations do not have very much appetite when they see their own people, whether it's Americans, Canadians, whoever it is, being kidnapped or taken hostage and even tortured. And often that can affect the outcome of a war which might be affecting millions and millions of people, but it can hinge on one or two people being taken hostage. It's been my view for a number of years, and even when I was informing and giving advice relative to engagements and battles with other countries, that a country should make it clear that their goals in terms of prosecuting a war and finishing a war will not be altered by the fact that one of their own soldiers has been hostage taken. The message should be very clear to any adversary that any taking of hostages will be met with full fury, and the people involved in that will be tracked down to the end of their lives, but that an entire nation cannot, in fact, be taken hostage, or an international war cannot be taken hostage because some vicious people who don't care about things like torture would wind up possibly kidnapping some individuals. There have to be two things can be true at once. Number one, everything would always be done to rescue a hostage, but the termination of a war is not going to be affected. The goals of a military operation have to be continued. We'll see what kind of articulation happens on that. Meanwhile, it appears that a possible signal that Iran has in fact not captured the other pilot. They've sent a signal just hours ago that they're going to open the door. They're leaving the door open for peace talks, even as the other hostilities continue. They've also sent a signal that they're open to looking at loosening or relaxing the control on the Strait of Hormuz. Remember, the Strait of Hormuz, so much world trade goes through there. Everything, many of the things that we're buying even today in far-flung parts of Canada, United States, affected by what moves through there, mainly, of course, energy products. So is Iran just trying to buy time? And by sending signals that they're willing to continue the discussion, we don't know. The other thing to look for in the week ahead, a lot of turmoil right now in the whole defense and army departments in the U.S. because the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has just fired the Army Chief of Staff, a gentleman by the name of General Randy George. There's all kinds of rumors going along. Is this just done because there's another person that's chomping at the bit to take Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's job? And that person, gentleman by the name of, he's the Army Secretary, actually, his name's Dan Driscoll. He's got a major supporter in the White House in the form of the Vice President. So it's there's a lot of moving parts going on, And is this strange, or does this spell disaster for the war effort when the top general gets axed or changed? Not really. When you look back in history, there's some pretty historic moments where generals get suddenly sacked by a president. Of course, one of the most famous back in the Civil War in the U.S. with Abraham Lincoln, where he fired his top general, George McClellan, because things just were not moving around and moving fast enough. And so interesting that these things, Ulysses Grant, of course, became the general after that, went on to become president of the United States. So these take on amazing proportions. Back in 1951, in the Korean War, Canada was involved in that war. Douglas MacArthur was a larger-than-life-size general, having been very successful in the Second World War, and he actually challenged Harry Truman, the President Truman's policy related to Korea and China. He got the boot. And Barack Obama, of course, you will recall in 2010, his top general, Stanley McChrystal, things just were not going as well as they wanted to in various elements of their wars, notably Afghanistan. He got punted. So this is not completely strange. It does happen, but it needs to be done carefully. Usually you see an ongoing surge after something like this happens. We'll see what emerges. Watch for that this week. Well, on the Canadian scene, watch for continuing developments. Some people are calling it the cannabis wars, but RCMP have actually gone onto First Nations land and raided, I guess you could call it, their cannabis stores. Now, as we know, cannabis can be sold under certain conditions in Canada. And what exactly has transpired to cause the RCMP to crash in onto First Nations land? It's shut down highways. It's got huge attention. A lot of people upset in the First Nations community saying this is their land and they can sell cannabis in ways that they want. So watch for that to continue. You're going to see continuing development there. Another area on First Nations that you're going to see continuing development. You want to watch for this, and it's emerging in British Columbia, where you have something called, you're going to hear more and more of this, you hear media talking about DRIPA or UNDRIP, and this is a United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. It flows from the United Nations, and that act says that almost everything the government does, you significantly have to take into account things like First Nations land claims and other claims that they have. And Premier Eby, the socialist premier in British Columbia, has been a supporter of this, but the very high opposition to the First Nations being able to have what some people see as excess authority on everything from selling your homes to conducting businesses. It's now in a meeting that was just recorded over the weekend, Premier Eby actually backing away from supporting DRIPA or the UN, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act. It's all tied in with United Nations declarations and now manifesting in Canada. And right away, First Nations chiefs are saying this is a major betrayal from the part of Premier Eby. Now, the other reason that Premier Eby is all of a sudden finding newfound interest in trying to get things under control relative to even issues like property and land is the fact that the British Columbia Conservative Party is having a leadership race. Most of the candidates there are saying they will scrap that act altogether. They're saying, of course, they will still deal with First Nations people, but not under the weight of that act. And Premier Eby, who is seeming to be in trouble politically, the deficit has gone off the rails, the budget is out of sight, prices in British Columbia are really soaring. People are leaving. He's facing a possible election. We're going to see what happens. Keep an eye on developments in BC as far as how that is going to work out. Well, the Prime Minister is under a little bit of pressure in Canada, again, related to First Nations issues, because he made appeared to be an offhanded comment. He was doing holding an event, and a First Nations woman by the name of Chrissy Isaacs, she's from Grassy Narrows First Nation. She's been suffering from mercury poisoning and trying to take that whole issue to the level of the federal government for proper compensation. And she was chanting and doing other things outside of the meeting where the Prime Minister was meeting with other officials. And he made a comment, and someone said, "What do you think about Chrissy Isaacs and her her plea relative to suffering from mercury poisoning, and he made an offhanded comment saying, well, I think I can outlast her. So, things can get said in an offhanded way. It's gotten the grassy narrows chief, Sherry Ackaby, very upset about that. They've been pressing Prime Minister for an apology, just to say he was sorry. So far, he hasn't done that. So that's got a lot of people scratching their head. Why not just say you were sorry? You didn't mean what you were intended to say. But that's put a lot of pressure, and he's finding a little bit of disfavor from the First Nations community. Well, in the area of education, keep watching trends more and more, not just this week, but in the weeks ahead, because as AI is making it significantly available, making education significantly available to people at every level, in the top areas, not just of learning material, but of how to understand it, are expanding rapidly. The whole question of how much should teachers need to be involved when it comes to the accumulation and assimilation of material. There's something called Alpha School. You're going to hear more about this. It's not the only one of its type, but by using AI materials, they're able, just in what they proclaim, because they have school modules or school groups or school co-ops. This is across the United States. There are more of them coming up in Canada now. And what they focus on, a few hours of intensive daily study with adult guidance, but using AI. Students are gaining mastery of difficult areas, whether it be mathematics related or engineering or chemistry, areas that in the last couple of decades we've seen public schools want to even shy away from, in terms of insisting that people hit mastery and that they can be tested at different levels. And students, and we're talking, this isn't just a minor project, students being able to get significant advancement and acquiring mastery in these areas, and then being able on other parts of the day to do things for which they have a passion. Could be hands-on learning, could be field trips or workshops, and the ability to truly individualize education and really see students make progress, and at the same time have them involved in collective activities. That's catching on, and you're going to see more and more pressure on the teaching model, which is basically a model that's over 100 years old, a standard classic model in a public setting, and also as increasing pressures come to bear on governments when public schools are raising ideological questions that many parents are not happy with. So you've got this combination of parents not being happy with ideological positions that they don't have any input on, and also not perceiving that their students are gaining mastery in key areas and skills which they're going to need to be successful further in life. Really, in every area, the more you have innovation and the more you have healthy competition, the better off people are going to be. So we're encouraging, a number of us are encouraging governments, let parents truly have choice. If they want a public system that is filled with ideological items that are to the far left and are culturally Marxist, well, parents can have that, should be able to have that option. But for those who want other options that they believe to be more productive and lead to a healthier society, they should be able to have those options too. The debate is raging because, of course, teachers' unions are infuriated that anything other than a 150-year-old model should be in place. Watch for that developing. This is coming up not just this week, but in the weeks ahead. Keep an eye on that. The issue in continuing in Canadian hospitals, recent story of 5 more deaths just related to healthcare delays, and this is just in one province, in the province of Manitoba. Look for the debate to continue about why is Canada the only country in the free world that does not allow 2-track systems, whereby, first of all, every citizen, no matter what their financial situation, has full access to healthcare, but they can choose different means of getting access to that, and doctors can be able to deliver services, top services, to all people regardless of their choice. That seems to alleviate pressures, but Canada is stubbornly holding on to this single-based model. And I think you're going to see, even as we're now in the age where some politicians are open to considering different models, you have the possible rise of the Federal Socialist Party, the NDP party, with its new leader, Avi Lewis. He is radically far to the left, and he will be screaming about any politician or any medical group that talks about alternate health services and the provision of those, even if it leads to better outcomes. If it's any break from the intense one-choice-only socialist model that he would be espousing, you're going to see him raising the fire on that, and mainstream media will be supporting him. So watch for developments as that goes along on the political area. On the U.S., in terms of our economic or various economic new types of things that are emerging, keep an eye, and we've talked about it before, could be the largest IPO. That's what's called a public offering. That's when somebody takes their company and sells shares in it in a very widespread way. And Elon Musk, SpaceX, thinking of going to an IPO. Now they're saying, they were wondering even 2 weeks ago, could it even hit $1 trillion? I was making the prediction it's going to go past $1 trillion. I think you're going to have people, because they're going to open it up to what they call retail investors, not just the large banks. And you've got huge entities that are going to be buying up stock in SpaceX. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, that's a huge fund with billions of dollars to invest. They've already indicated they're in. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all these huge investment houses are going to be buying up huge amounts of that for their large-scale institutional clients. But Musk has also indicated he's going to make maybe up to 30% of those shares available to, the little folks like you and like me. And we'll see how that's going to go. That will be an amazing change in terms of how stock markets evolve when you can have them much more, these large IPOs where individual citizens can be involved. Watch for that. Well, as we near Easter, which is, of course, tomorrow, interesting development with a debate, a very high-scale global debate between the Pope, which largely, of course, represents the Catholic religion, and Franklin Graham, who's, even though the Protestant and more evangelical side doesn't have any one leader, there are different ones that emerge as spokespeople. And the Pope has been decrying anything to do with the Iranian war. He thinks all war, no war should exist. That's one position. And Franklin Graham saying, well, there are situations in which people may have to go to war to fight for their liberties. And he's been citing King David, as a matter of fact. So watch for that. Continue to evolve that broad discussion. But one thing that nobody's really arguing about, with the Catholic Church especially, media reports continue to talk about a significant rise in people joining the Catholic Church, and also on the evangelical side, but very prominent on the Catholic side, a 30% increase moving towards this in terms of adult conversions, and many of them, of those, this is slank to the younger population, 30 years old and younger. That is continuing to be on the rise, and especially getting media notice as we move towards Easter. And as we do that, if you celebrate Easter, may we wish you a joyous time. And those of our friends who are finishing up their Passover celebrations, we just wish people a glorious time as they draw closer to God and find the true peace that really is what is going to make the difference in all of the other discussions that we've been talking about today. Happy Easter, everybody, and a blessed Passover, and talk to you on Monday.